Welcome to Web Lizard Lab's Cert Lab. This is AZ-104 Practice Exam 1, Entra ID Essentials. You will work through 30 source-backed administration decisions across users, groups, licenses, guests, authentication, and self-service password reset. Each question includes the complete task and answer choices. After lock in your answer, you'll have 3 silent seconds. Then we'll reveal the answer and the reusable administration pattern. If you enjoy our videos, please like and subscribe to support the channel. Question 1 of 30. A company is onboarding one new employee, Pilar Ackerman, as an internal member of its Microsoft Entra tenant. The identity administrator has the user administrator role and must create the account during the standard onboarding window by using the Microsoft Entra Admin Center. Which action should the administrator take? Select one answer. Invite Pilar as an external guest, create a group for Pilar, select New User, select Create New User and enter a unique user principal name, send a Microsoft Graph user creation request, and check for a 201 response. Lock in your answer. The correct answer is C. Select New User, select Create New User, and enter a unique user principal name. The single user portal path is New User, then Create New User. The administrator must supply a unique username and select a domain for the user principal name. This creates the required internal user object through the specified interface. Administration pattern. When a task names one internal worker and fixes the interface to the admin center, choose the direct new user creation path rather than a guest, group, or API path. Question 2 of 30. A company must provision 180 employees as internal member accounts in one Microsoft Entra tenant. Their initial attributes are available in a consistently formatted data file. The change window permits one user creation submission for the intake. The company does not use an on-premises directory as the source for these accounts, and the accounts must not be created as external guests. Which provisioning operation meets the submission constraint? Select one answer. Create each internal member separately in the admin center. Create Active Directory users and provision them through Connect Sync. Bulk invite the employees as external guests. Complete the downloadable bulk user CSV template and run bulk create. Lock in your answer. The correct answer is D. Complete the downloadable bulk user CSV template and run bulk create. Microsoft Entra Bulk User Creation accepts a completed CSV template and creates multiple internal member accounts in one bulk submission. Creating users separately would require multiple creation submissions. Bulk invitation creates external guests, and Connect Sync depends on an upstream directory source. Administration pattern. Distinguish a CSV-based bulk creation submission from repeated individual creation, guest invitation, and synchronization from an upstream directory. Question 3 of 30. A new finance department needs access to the same shared resources. The department manager will centrally maintain which employees belong to the access container. An administrator with the group's administrator role must create the required Microsoft Entra object. Which object should the administrator create? Select one answer. A security group for the finance employees. An administrative unit for the finance employees. A user account that represents the finance department. An external guest account for the department manager. Lock in your answer. The correct answer is A, a security group for the finance employees. Security groups are used to manage access to shared resources. Assigning access to the group applies that access to its members, while delegated group management can let the department manager maintain membership. Administration pattern. Choose a security group when the requirement is to apply shared resource access to a centrally maintained set of people. Choose an administrative unit only for scoped delegation. Question 4 of 30. A company has a security group for its sales department. Employees move into and out of sales frequently, but each user's department attribute is kept current. The tenant has sufficient qualifying license coverage for every unique user who will belong to a dynamic membership group. Which membership model should the administrator configure to minimize explicit membership maintenance? Select one answer. Assigned membership, with administrators adding and removing named users. Dynamic user membership, with a rule based on user.department. Dynamic device membership, with a rule based on device attributes. Static membership, populated after accounts are bulk created from a CSV. Lock in your answer. The correct answer is B. Dynamic user membership with a rule based on user.department. A dynamic user membership rule can evaluate the maintained department attribute. Matching users are added automatically, and users who stop matching are removed automatically. A single expression can follow the form user.department equals sales. Administration pattern. If maintained user attributes express who belongs and membership changes often, use a user-based dynamic rule. Do not confuse identity provisioning with ongoing group population. Question 5 of 30. The verified custom domain fabricam.com is already present in a Microsoft Entra tenant whose initial domain is fabricamcloud.onmicrosoft.com. A new cloud-only employee account does not yet exist. The account must be created as an internal member with the sign-in name nina@fabricam.com from the moment it is created. Which action meets the requirement? Select one answer. Create the user with a fabricamcloud.onmicrosoft.com UPN and add nina@fabricam.com later as a mail alias. Invite nina@fabricam.com as an external guest and grant member access. Create a group named nina@fabricam.com and add the employee after creation. During user creation, enter Nina as the username and select fabricam.com as the UPN domain. Lock in your answer. The correct answer is D. During user creation, enter Nina as the username and select fabricam.com as the UPN domain. The user principal name is selected when the cloud user is created. Because fabricam.com is verified in the tenant, selecting that suffix during creation produces the required internal member object with nina@fabricam.com as its sign-in identifier. Administration pattern. When the required sign-in suffix must exist at account creation, set the UPN with a tenant-verified domain during user creation, rather than changing a mail-related field later. Question 6 of 30. A company is replacing a legacy Microsoft Entra group. The legacy group must remain active throughout the current phase, and its memberships will be moved during a later phase. An administrator with the user administrator role must prepare the replacement now. Which plan should the administrator follow? Select one answer. Rename the legacy group now and treat the renamed object as the replacement. Delete the legacy group, create the replacement, and rebuild membership later. Create a distinct replacement group now, keep the legacy group active, and move membership later. Create a distinct replacement group and immediately move the legacy membership into it. Lock in your answer. The correct answer is C. Create a distinct replacement group now, keep the legacy group active, and move membership later. Creating a separate group produces a replacement with its own unique group identifier, while leaving the legacy object unchanged. Membership can then be moved in the later phase as required, and the new object can be retrieved by its identifier for verification. Administration pattern. If continuity requires an old container to stay active while migration is deferred, create a parallel object rather than renaming or deleting the existing one. Question 7 of 30. The job title shown for a synchronized employee is incorrect across Microsoft services. Windows Server Active Directory is the source of authority for the employee's identity, contact, and job information. The correction must persist after future synchronization cycles. Where should an administrator correct the job title? Select one answer. In the employee's Windows Server Active Directory record, in the employee's assigned license collection, in the properties of a group that contains the employee, directly in the employee's Microsoft Entra profile without changing the authoritative source. Lock in your answer. The correct answer is A, in the employee's Windows Server Active Directory record. When Windows Server Active Directory is authoritative for job information, the durable correction must be made there. The administrator then waits for synchronization to carry the updated value into Microsoft Entra ID and the services that display profile information. Administration pattern. For a synchronized profile field, first identify its source of authority. Make durable corrections at that source rather than in an entitlement or container. Question 8 of 30. A non-administrative employee is beginning a temporary leave. The company must stop the employee from obtaining new tokens for applications tied to Microsoft Entra ID. Applications retain references to the user's existing object ID, so the user object must remain continuously present in the tenant and must not be deleted or recovered from deletion. A user administrator will perform the change for this one account, and access will be restored when the employee returns. Which action should the administrator take? Select one answer. Delete the user and plan to restore the account within 30 days. Keep the account enabled and remove the user's resource role assignments. Clear account enabled, save the change, and revoke the user's sessions. Keep the account enabled and revoke the user's sessions only. Lock in your answer. The correct answer is C. Clear account enabled, save the change, and revoke the user's sessions. Clearing account enabled and saving blocks new sign-ins for the user, and revoking sessions revokes refresh tokens. These actions preserve the existing Microsoft Entra user object and its object ID for later reactivation. Deleting and later restoring the user is outside the requirement because the identity must remain continuously present and must not enter the deleted user lifecycle. Administration pattern. When an identity object must remain continuously present, use the account-enabled state and session revocation for reversible suspension, rather than relying on the deleted user recovery window. Question 9 of 30. A security group controls access for a project team. Devin has become responsible for routine administration of the existing group and must be able to modify the group object. The group's purpose, membership model, and current member set must remain unchanged. An administrator with the group's administrator role will make the update. Which property update should the administrator make? Select one answer. Add Devin to the group's member collection, add Devin to the group's owner collection, change the group's membership type, replace the existing group with a new group for Devin. Lock in your answer. The correct answer is B. Add Devin to the group's owner collection. Group owners are allowed to modify the group object. Adding Devin through the owner's relationship transfers routine administration without changing the member collection or the group's membership model. Administration pattern. When responsibility for an existing group changes, but its membership and purpose do not, update the owner relationship rather than the member set or group object. Question 10 of 30. An existing static Microsoft Entra security group is cloud created, isn't role assignable, and is eligible for conversion to dynamic membership. The tenant has the required Microsoft Entra licensing. Applications and resources reference the group, so its object identity and existing references must remain unchanged. Administrators have prepared an attribute-based membership rule. Organizational change control requires the rule to be validated before the membership type is changed. A group's administrator will perform the work. Which two actions are required by the technical and change control requirements? Select exactly two answers. Create a new dynamic membership group and redirect every existing reference. Test the proposed membership rule before making the conversion. Add another owner while leaving the group membership type static. Change the existing group's membership type from static to dynamic. Lock in your answer. The correct answers are B. Test the proposed membership rule before making the conversion, and D. Change the existing group's membership type from static to dynamic. The tenant and group satisfy the prerequisites for in-place conversion. The organization's change control explicitly requires rule validation, so the administrator must test the proposed rule and then change the existing group's membership type from static to dynamic. In-place conversion preserves the existing group identity and references, while rule evaluation updates membership. Administration pattern. Confirm conversion eligibility and distinguish mandatory rule validation plus in-place membership type conversion from group recreation or ownership changes. Question 11 of 30. A company has an existing cloud-only member user named Alicia. The company is replacing Alicia's sign-in suffix with fabricam.com, which is already verified in the Microsoft Entra tenant. Alicia must keep the same directory object and object ID. Her usage location and license assignment must remain unchanged. Which action should you take? Select one answer. Change Alicia's display name to use the new suffix. Change Alicia's usage location to the new domain's location. Update Alicia's user principal name to use fabricam.com. Delete Alicia and create a user that uses fabricam.com. Lock in your answer. The correct answer is C. Update Alicia's user principal name to use fabricam.com. The user principal name is the user's Microsoft Entra sign-in name. Updating that property on the existing user changes the suffix while retaining the same directory object. The replacement domain is eligible because it is verified in the tenant, and neither licensing metadata nor the license assignment needs to change. Administration pattern. When a sign-in suffix changes but identity continuity is required, identify the sign-in name property rather than altering licensing metadata or replacing the identity. Question 12 of 30. An existing Microsoft Entra group named Finance Shared must comply with a convention that requires the name Corp Finance Shared. The group's purpose and population must not change, and references to the existing group must remain traceable. Which group management action should you take? Select one answer. Change the group's membership type, edit the existing group's name, create a replacement group with the required name, remove and re-add the group's members. Lock in your answer. The correct answer is B. Edit the existing group's name. The name is an editable property of the existing group. Editing it normalizes the administrative label while preserving the group itself and leaving its membership and purpose unchanged. Administration pattern. For a naming-only requirement, prefer an editable display property on the existing directory object over changes to membership or object lifecycle. Question 13 of 30. Product X is assigned to a dynamic employees group. An external specialist who does not satisfy that group's membership rule needs Product X for a short engagement. The licensing team requires the specialist to appear individually in the product assignment list, while the existing employee cohort and its rule remain unchanged. Which licensing action should the administrator take? Select one answer. Open the specialist's user account and assign Product X on the Licenses page. Create an assigned security group containing the specialist and assign Product X to that group. Extend the employees group's dynamic membership rule to include the specialist and retain the group's Product X assignment. Convert the employees group to assigned membership. Add the specialist and retain the group's Product X assignment. Lock in your answer. The correct answer is A. Open the specialist's user account and assign Product X on the licenses page. Assign Product X on the specialist's user account. Direct user licensing assigns the product to that specific user and is an alternative to group-based licensing. The product assignment list shows a directly licensed user individually, whereas a group-based assignment shows the group. This makes the specialist appear individually without changing the employee's group's rule. Administration pattern. A direct user assignment causes the user to appear individually in the product assignment list. A group-based assignment displays the group instead. Question 14 of 30. A security group contains 250 first-level users in a stable workforce cohort. The company's identity team centrally maintains the group's membership. Every current and future member of this group must receive the same product license. Which licensing configuration should you use? Select one answer. Assign the product license to the existing security group. Assign the product license directly to each current user. Place the security group inside a parent group and license the parent group. Assign an Azure role to the existing security group. Lock in your answer. The correct answer is A. Assign the product license to the existing security group. Assigning the product license to the supported group uses group-based licensing. Users can inherit the assignment through first-level group membership, so entitlement administration follows the centrally maintained cohort. Administration pattern. When the same entitlement should track a maintained cohort, place the license on a supported group and confirm that the users are first-level members. Question 15 of 30. A product has fewer available licenses than the number of users in a pending cohort assignment. An attempted assignment reports that no licenses are available for the selected product. The company wants every user in the planned cohort to receive the product before the rollout is considered complete. Which two actions should you take to complete the rollout? Select exactly two answers. Turn off apps and services within the selected product. Free enough licenses for the selected product. Change the affected user's identity metadata. Reprocess the assignment after capacity is available. Lock in your answer. The correct answers are B. Free enough licenses for the selected product, and D. Reprocess the assignment after capacity is available. The failure is a product capacity shortfall. First, reconcile capacity by freeing enough licenses for the planned cohort. After the underlying issue is resolved, reprocess the failed assignment so the affected users can receive licenses under the current available capacity. Administration pattern. Separate product capacity failures from service plan and identity property issues. Restore capacity first, then retry the affected assignment. Question 16 of 30. Group App is a supported licensing group. Everyone who becomes a member must automatically receive a product, and anyone removed from the group must stop receiving the group-based assignment. Members require the product, but must not receive one specified app or service included with it. No member receives this product through another group. How should you configure licensing for Group App? Select one answer. Assign the product to Group App and turn off the specified included service in that group assignment. Assign the product to Group App and leave every included service enabled. Do not assign the product to Group App. Assign the product directly to each current member and turn off the specified service in each direct assignment. Lock in your answer. The correct answer is A. Assign the product to Group App and turn off the specified included service in that group assignment. A group license assignment makes the product follow supported group membership. The assignment can keep the product assigned while turning off a selected app or service. That combination meets both the membership-driven requirement and the service plan exception without direct per-user licensing or removal of the whole product. Administration pattern. Use the group assignment for membership-driven entitlement and use its app and service controls when the product remains required but one included service does not. Question 17 of 30. A departing employee has Microsoft 365 E5 assigned directly to the employee's user account. The tenant does not use group-based licensing for this product, and the employee's finance app's security group membership is unrelated to licensing. No Microsoft 365 E5 licenses are currently available for a replacement employee. Legal policy requires the departing user's directory account to be retained for 90 days. Which action should an administrator take before assigning Microsoft 365 E5 to the replacement employee? Select one answer. Block sign-in for the departing user, delete the departing user's directory account, unassign Microsoft 365 E5 from the departing user, remove the departing user from the Finance app security group. Lock in your answer. The correct answer is C. Unassign Microsoft 365 E5 from the departing user. Because the Microsoft 365 E5 license is assigned directly to the departing user, unassigning that license removes the entitlement from that user and makes the license available for reassignment. Blocking sign-in changes access state, but does not itself remove the license. Deleting the account is prohibited by the retention requirement, and changing membership in an unrelated security group does not alter a directly assigned license. Administration pattern. Establish whether a license is direct or group inherited before choosing the reclamation operation. Sign-in state and identity retention are separate controls. Question 18 of 30. An imported cloud user has a null usage location property. Automation will license the user through a direct Microsoft Graph user assignment rather than through group-based licensing. The first license submission must succeed. In which order should you perform the actions? Arrange both actions in the order in which they should be performed, from first to last. Post the product SKU and add licenses to the user's assigned license endpoint. Patch the user resource with the appropriate two-letter usage location value. Lock in your answer. The correct order is, first, patch the user resource with the appropriate two-letter usage location value. Second, post the product SKU and add licenses to the user's assigned license endpoint. For a direct license assignment, usage location is required to support the location-dependent service availability check. Set the property first and then assign the product license to the user. Administration pattern. For direct licensing, satisfy required user metadata before performing the entitlement assignment. Do not generalize the tenant location inheritance behavior of group licensing to direct assignments. Question 19 of 30. A partner contact needs planned access to resources in your Microsoft Entra tenant. The contact must continue to use an external identity and must be represented as an external collaboration identity rather than as a workforce member. Which onboarding action should you take first? Select one answer. Invite the contact as an external user. Create the contact as a cloud-only member user. Assign an Azure role directly to the contact's email address. Add the contact's email address to a resource group. Lock in your answer. The correct answer is A. Invite the contact as an external user. Inviting the contact as an external user creates a B2B collaboration account whose user type is guest by default. The partner then redeems the invitation to access resources. Group or role assignment is a separate authorization step that can occur after the external identity exists. Administration pattern. Establish the correct identity type before assigning access. External collaborators follow the invitation and redemption path, while authorization comes afterward. Question 20 of 30. A B2B guest account already exists for a partner contact. The account's external user state is pending acceptance because the contact has not completed redemption. The contact reports that the original invitation email cannot be found. Existing resource assignments are correct. Which action should you take to advance the contact's onboarding? Select one answer. Reset the guest's redemption status. Reassign the guest's resource role. Create a workforce user and send its credentials. Resend the guest invitation. Lock in your answer. The correct answer is D. Resend the guest invitation. For an invitation in pending acceptance, resending sends another invitation email. Resending does not itself complete redemption. The contact must use the invitation to redeem access. Resetting redemption status applies after a guest has already redeemed, which is not this account's state. Administration pattern. Use the external invitation state to choose the recovery action. Pending redemption calls for another invitation, while reset is reserved for a previously redeemed guest. Question 21 of 30. A consulting engagement has ended, and the consultant's external user object is no longer needed in the Microsoft Entra tenant. Policy requires the administrator to start a recoverable deletion period for the user object now. The object must be restorable if the engagement owner reverses the decision within 30 days. Which action meets the identity lifecycle requirement? Select one answer. Remove the external user only from the engagement's collaboration group. Delete the external user object from Microsoft Entra ID. Change the external user's profile to mark the engagement as expired. Leave the external user object in place until every resource assignment has been reviewed. Lock in your answer. The correct answer is B. Delete the external user object from Microsoft Entra ID. Deleting the external user object places it in the deleted user's lifecycle, from which it can be restored during the documented 30-day period. Removing one group membership or changing profile metadata does not delete the tenant's external user object, while postponing deletion fails a requirement to start the recoverable deletion period now. Administration pattern. Distinguish deletion of the external identity object and its recoverable lifecycle from removing one assignment or changing profile metadata. Question 22 of 30. 5 partner users already exist as external identities in your Microsoft Entra tenant. An existing assigned group grants the standard collaboration access required by all 5 users. You must apply that shared access pattern without creating new identities or assigning the resource permissions separately to each user. Which action should you take? Select one answer. Invite the 5 users to the tenant again. Assign the collaboration permissions directly to each user. Add the 5 existing users as members of the assigned group. Convert the group to dynamic membership and manually add the 5 users. Lock in your answer. The correct answer is C. Add the 5 existing users as members of the assigned group. Because the external identities already exist and the group is assigned, add the users as group members. Membership then applies the access already configured for the group, and the group overview updates to reflect the added members. Administration pattern. Separate guest invitation from post-onboarding authorization. When external identities already exist and access is group-based, perform membership administration on an assigned group. Question 23 of 30. An employee has become an external advisor. The employee's existing Microsoft Entra user object is classified as member. Governance requires the same object to be retained and classified as guest. Existing assignments will be reviewed separately, and the change must not create a replacement identity. Which change should you make to the existing user? Select one answer. Remove the user from all current groups. Delete the user and send a guest invitation. Change the user's display name to identify the advisor relationship. Update the existing user's user type from member to guest. Lock in your answer. The correct answer is D. Update the existing user's user type from member to guest. The user type property classifies the user's relationship to the host organization and can be converted between member and guest on the existing user. Updating only user type retains the addressed object, while omitted properties remain unchanged. Administration pattern. When the relationship classification changes but object continuity is mandatory, update user type rather than modifying access, naming, or identity onboarding. Question 24 of 30. A guest user's collaboration is continuing, but the employee who sponsored the guest has left your organization. Another employee has accepted responsibility for keeping the guest's information, privileges, and access current. The guest user object must remain in place. Which administrative action should you take to establish the successor's responsibility? Select one answer. Delete the guest and invite the guest again through the successor. Transfer ownership of the guest's collaboration group to the successor. Add the successor through post the sponsor reference to the user's ID sponsor's endpoint. Delete the departing sponsor relationship without appending the reference suffix. Lock in your answer. The correct answer is C. Add the successor through post the sponsor reference to the user's ID sponsor's endpoint. A sponsor is responsible for a guest user's privileges and for keeping the guest's information and access current. Add the successor to the retained guest sponsor collection by posting the sponsor reference to the user's ID sponsor's reference endpoint. The collection can then be verified with get the user's ID sponsors collection. Administration pattern. Treat sponsorship as a relationship on the guest object. Changing responsibility calls for relationship administration, not identity replacement or group ownership changes. Question 25 of 30. Your organization will introduce self-service password reset in phases. A test group containing non-administrator users is ready, but no users outside that group should be enabled until the registration workflow and support process have been validated. Authentication methods are configured separately. Which self-service password reset population scope should you configure for the initial rollout? Select one answer. None. All. Selected, using the test group, the specific group in the authentication methods policy. Lock in your answer. The correct answer is C. Selected, using the test group. The selected scope enables SSPR for a subset, so the organization can test registration and reset workflows before a broader rollout. None would enable no pilot users, while all would exceed the required initial boundary. Authentication method targeting is a separate control from SSPR population scope. Administration pattern. For a controlled SSPR pilot, choose the population control that enables a defined subset. Do not substitute authentication method targeting for rollout scope. Question 26 of 30. A group is already enabled for self-service password reset. Security has approved a constrained set of recovery methods for that group. At the start of the task, no unapproved method configuration in the authentication methods policy targets the group, either directly or through a broader group that includes its users. You must configure method availability without changing the SSPR population scope. The method selected must be usable during password reset, and the existing number of methods requirement must remain effective. Which two actions meet the requirements? Select exactly two answers. Enable the approved methods for the group in the authentication methods policy. Confirm that each selected method can participate in password reset, rather than being authentication only. Change the SSPR population scope from the group to all users. Use authentication methods activity to define which methods the group is allowed to use. Lock in your answer. The correct answers are A. Enable the approved methods for the group in the authentication methods policy, and B. Confirm that each selected method can participate in password reset rather than being authentication only. The current authentication methods policy is the configuration mechanism for enabling methods for all users or specific groups. Because some methods are authentication only, each approved recovery method must support password reset. This leaves the existing SSPR population and the separate number of methods requirement unchanged. Administration pattern. Separate 3 SSPR controls: population eligibility, allowed authentication methods, and the number of methods required for reset. Question 27 of 30. A pilot population is enabled for self-service password reset, but many users have not registered the minimum required recovery methods. You want users to complete registration during supported sign-in flows and want to assess registration results before the organization depends on SSPR. Administrator password reset should remain only the fallback for users who are not ready. In which order should you stage the registration readiness process? Arrange all 3 steps in the order they should occur, from first to last. Review recent successful and failed registrations by authentication method. Have pilot users register during modern authentication or web browser sign-ins. Enable the option that requires users to complete SSPR registration when signing in. Lock in your answer. The correct order is: first, enable the option that requires users to complete SSPR registration when signing in. Second, have pilot users register during modern authentication or web browser sign-ins. Third, review recent successful and failed registrations by authentication method. First, enable required registration for the rollout population. Users are then interrupted to register during modern authentication or browser sign-ins. After registration attempts occur, review authentication methods activity for successful and failed registrations by method. A user who still lacks the minimum methods cannot use SSPR and requires an administrator reset as a fallback. Administration pattern. A readiness rollout follows a control flow evidence pattern. Enable the registration control, let the target population encounter it, then inspect registration activity. Question 28 of 30. Self-service password reset is already enabled for the intended users in your tenant. Compliance requires users to receive email when their own password is reset and requires all administrators to be notified when an administrator account password is reset through SSPR. You must not change SSPR eligibility, authentication methods, or registration policy. Which configuration should you apply? Select one answer. Set Notify Users on Password Resets to Yes. Set Notify All Admins when other admins reset their password to Yes, and save. Set Notify Users on Password Resets to Yes. Leave Administrator Reset notifications disabled, and save. Change Self-Service Password Reset eligibility to All Users, and save. Change the allowed authentication methods and require users to register again. Lock in your answer. The correct answer is A. Set Notify Users on Password Resets to Yes. Set Notify All Admins when other admins reset their password to Yes. And save. The 2 SSPR notification preferences independently provide the required user and administrator email behavior. Enabling both and saving changes future reset notifications without altering the already configured eligibility population, authentication methods, or registration policy. Administration pattern. When the requirement concerns who is informed after an SSPR event, configure notification preferences rather than eligibility, proof methods, or registration readiness. Question 29 of 30. Self-service password reset is enabled only for a pilot group. A cloud-only user in your tenant's home directory is outside the pilot and has forgotten a password. An authorized password administrator must restore access now without expanding the SSPR rollout. The user is not assigned an administrator role. What should the password administrator do? Select one answer. Change the SSPR population scope to all and ask the user to perform a self-service reset. Add the user to the pilot group and ask the user to perform a self-service reset. Select the user in Microsoft Entra ID and invoke Reset Password. Assign an Azure role to the user and retry self-service password reset. Lock in your answer. The correct answer is C. Select the user in Microsoft Entra ID and invoke Reset Password. Administrator Password Reset is the operational fallback for this eligible cloud account when self-service is unavailable. The authorized administrator selects the user and invokes Reset Password. For a Microsoft Entra Cloud account, the reset generates a temporary password that the user must change at the next sign-in, without changing the separate SSPR population scope. Administration pattern. When a user is outside the effective self-service path and scope must remain fixed, use an authorized administrator reset if the account's authority and role boundaries permit it. Question 30 of 30. Self-service password reset is currently enabled for a selected population. The organization wants to expand coverage to most users, but a temporary exception cohort must remain outside the effective SSPR population. The exception must not be implemented by removing authentication methods, and SSPR must remain available to the expanding general population. Which two configuration decisions preserve the exception while expanding coverage? Select exactly two answers. Keep the SSPR population scope set to Selected. Expand effective membership of the selected population while keeping the exception cohort outside that membership. Set the SSPR population scope to All and configure the exception cohort as an SSPR exclusion group. Set the SSPR population scope to None and remove recovery methods from the exception cohort. Lock in your answer. The correct answers are A. Keep the SSPR population scope set to Selected, and B. Expand effective membership of the selected population while keeping the exception cohort outside that membership. The documented population controls are None, Selected, and All. No separate exclusion group control is established. Therefore, keep Selected and expand its effective membership while leaving the exception cohort outside that membership. This enables the wider intended population without enabling the exception. Authentication methods. Activity can report aggregate SSPR capability, which still depends on both enablement and enough registered methods. Administration pattern. If a service offers inclusive population scopes, but no documented exclusion control, preserve exceptions by keeping an inclusive selected scope and managing who is effectively included. Confidence check. For each identity problem, name the tenant scope, the controlling object, and the evidence you would verify before changing anything. If you can explain those three things, you are building administrator-level judgment, not just memorizing clicks. Thanks for practicing with WebLizard Lab's CertLab. Keep tracing the control plane. Continue with Practice Exam 2 for governance scope and operational controls.